Try that again. Hello and welcome to the Pod of the Damned. I'm your host, Ian.
Oh,
And I totally fucked that up. It's fine. It's fine.
not at all.
Joining me, as always, is my co-host, Nico. How is it going, buddy?
Even better after that.
I know you take some sort of just sick, twisted pleasure,
Twisted.
don't you, in me fucking things up on the podcast.
Always.
You know what? Like, you could laugh. Like, next time you can laugh. Next time you're doing the intros, you're doing the plugs, because you've yet to ever actually do that.
That's your job, not mine.
No. You are a co-host.
I'm here to look pretty. That's it.
Are you like the color? You're like the color commentator.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, that's
I'm
fine.
Jerry Lawler.
You're.
My job is to
I
take
wouldn't
a heart
admit to
attack
that.
before failing.
I don't think you should
I don't
admit to
ever
be.
promise that shit.
I wouldn't admit to that, Nico. Anyways, we are not alone, as you may be able to see. If you are watching this live, we have a very special guest, absolute legend, friend of the show, has been I think you've probably contributed to almost every single episode with your thoughts and opinions. You like to leave us nice, big, long reviews to read out on the show, and we are forever grateful for it. We are joined today by the incredible Wren. How are you doing, my friend?
How's it going? Now you get to hear me talk in great lengths instead of just writing it out.
Well, that's fine, because the more you talk, the less I have to talk, and that is not only a good thing for me, but it's probably a really good thing for our listeners as well, to hear less me, although it's even better for them to hear even less Nico. But it's all
Thanks,
good.
cheers, yeah.
It's all good. But no, we are both incredibly grateful to have you on the show, and welcome to the Pod of the Damned. It's like we were saying off air, it's been a long time coming. I know we've tried to get you on a couple of times, and you know, various aspects of life has gotten in the way, but we're very, very glad to finally have you here.
Yeah, there's always that ocean that's between us too. That's a little bit of a hindrance, but yeah, I'm super stoked to be here. Like you said, I've been following you since the beginning. I followed you from other shows, so I'm like honored to be here now and talking to you guys live and somewhat in person.
Somewhat in person. It's as close to in person as we're ever going to get, probably. So
Yeah, it's good to finally have you on.
yes, it absolutely is. In today's show, as everyone may know, we are a horror podcast that deep dives into a different topic every single week in our quest to create a leaderboard of the best and worst horror movies of all time. This is episode number 78, and in today's show, we are talking all about the 2016 sort of, I don't know whether to describe this as like a cult movie or a horror like phenomenon. We are talking about Terrifier. Now, I know, again, I mentioned it off air, that Ran, you've got some thoughts about this movie. Nico, I'm not actually sure yet where you fall on this, but I've got a funny feeling you're going to fall. I've got an inkling about which side you're going to fall down, and I don't think it's going to be on my side. But yeah, I don't know, like, how would you describe this? Like, it's because obviously Terrifier 2 came out at the tail end of last year. We've had Terrifier 3 announced. It's going to be coming out, I think they're saying late 24, that's going to be coming out. They're going to start working on that later this year. This franchise, because it is essentially a franchise now, has kind of taken the horror world by storm. Regardless of what you think about it, whether you think it's great or whether you think it's terrible, it has taken the horror world by storm in a way that so few other things of this magnitude have, because, you know, Terrifier is an incredibly low budget movie. Terrifier 2 obviously had a bigger budget, but still, in the grand scheme of things, you know, a low budget horror movie. I don't think I've ever really known something like this to take the horror movie world by storm in the way it has. I don't know, like, what do you guys think about
that? I think the closest one would probably be Blair Witch, or that's. I mean, regardless of how you feel about Blair Witch, that was the talk of the town for a while after it came out. And Terrifier has a lot of, reminds me of that. Not obviously in content wise, but the whole like just the word of mouth. Like, I don't know how it was over there, but here in the States, every weekend when Terrifier 2 came out, it just got more and more and more and more buzz.
Yeah.
And people who didn't even know that Terrifier 1 existed were going with Terrifier 2. So like, it's kind of, it reminds me a lot of what happened with Blair Witch. Blair Witch, the first weekend was big, but then just continuously it turned into this like monster. So that's the only thing that I can really compare it to.
Yeah.
Nico, yeah, I get what you mean, but I'd compare it more to like it's a gore fest. This movie, like you know what you're doing when you're going to watch this, basically.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So it's more like a Saw type movie, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean,
Oh,
like,
well, no doubt. Yeah.
I mean, obviously, yeah, you could absolutely compare it to those things. You know, you've got your Blair Witches. You probably would put, you know, Paranormal Activity in that sort of bracket as well. That was made for, you know, next to no money and, you know, absolutely exploded and created this whole franchise that made loads of money. Like you say, obviously, content wise, they're very different things. But, you know, yeah, okay, we can list, you know, Blair Witch. We can list like Paranormal Activity. Nico, you're comparing it there to Saw. But it's just, you know, that's a very exclusive club of movies.
Yeah.
You know, we're not talking about, you know, all these other movies. You know, a lot of movies that do go on to be successes, you know, were very well advertised, they were well marketed. You know, if you think back to Blair Witch, you know, Nico, I know that's your favorite horror movie of all time, but it's widely, look, we all know that Blair Witch probably had one of the best marketing campaign out of any horror movie ever, and that's what did it. When Terrifier first came out, the first one, there wasn't really that sort of buzz about it. You know, when, I mean, I only sort of stumbled upon it a few years after it was released. I think it was probably around sort of 2018, 2019 that I stumbled upon it. I don't remember there being any sort of buzz about it here. There definitely was a buzz about T2. T2 didn't get a cinema release in the UK though. Unless, I mean, if it did, it was very, very, very limited. I know it got its initial run in the US was a limited run, and then that just sort of kept getting extended and being released wider. They have announced, I think, that T3 is going to get a wide cinema release, so I'm kind of hoping that we're going to get that over here in the UK, because I do think...
Can't believe you're calling it T2 and T3. There's only one T2 in the planet, and it's not fucking this, by the way. What's not the next one?
I'm just going to do that now just to annoy you, Nico,
just to annoy me, yeah.
The rest of the episode.
I like, T2 was amazing. When Arnie put that thumb up, it was just the best scene ever.
But no, you know, so it's just really weird, because like I said, Terrifier came out, and I remember hearing a few people, like I would listen to other podcasts, and I think it wasn't even like a horror podcast I was listening to. I think it was a wrestling podcast I was actually listening to, and one of the hosts was randomly talking about this movie, that Terrifier, and that's how I got, like, sort of went to go seek it out. And you know, it definitely wasn't something that had a huge amount of buzz over here. Obviously, T2 had the buzz. Anyways, we'll get a bit more into it, because I've realised that I've just dived straight into the movie discussion and I haven't done any of the plugs or, you know, the intros or anything like that. So if you would like to support this podcast, you can do so. Our social medias on Twitter at Damn Podcast. We're on Facebook and Instagram at Pod of the Damned. You can email us at podofthedamned@gmail.com. You can subscribe to our Patreon, which is patreon.com/Pod of the Damned. We obviously broadcast all of our episodes here live on Twitch, twitch.tv/Pod of the Damned. But that is the only time you will get to watch these episodes on Twitch. They will then get straight uploaded exclusively for around 3 to 4 weeks to our Patreon subscribers before they eventually go up onto our YouTube channel. So, we also have new perks coming to our Patreon. Our newest perk, Nico, I don't think I've actually told you about this, is we're going to start sending out just random pieces of horror trivia to people's email addresses. And it's like going to start bombarding people, being like, So we're just going to start bugging people for that now. It's annoying people. But yeah.
That sounds like a great idea.
It does, doesn't it? I thought so, anyway.
I would hate that.
I know you would, Nico, but luckily I have no interest in contacting you beyond these calls. So it's
thanks. Cheers, yeah.
Is it time for that periodical reminder in an episode that me and Nico are friends? We have known each other for a long time. We are actually friends.
Don't let them lie to you. Before we went on, they were talking that they weren't.
Yeah. I was saying I was going to stab him and everything, you know, it's just Scottish way.
He was going to recreate the bedroom scene from Terrifier 2 on me.
That's a different bedroom scene, mate.
Oh, okay, sorry, I thought that's what you were talking about. Wren, do you have anything you would like to plug? Would you like to advertise? You don't have to, obviously, if you would.
I mean, if if people want to see me and on the internet, I'm Wren XXX on everything. I'm a monthly contributor to the Horror Flicks and Guitar Picks podcast. You can find them on horror_guitar on Twitter, and then it's Horror Flicks and Guitar Picks pod on Instagram, and I think Facebook is just Horror Flicks and Guitar Picks podcast. So I'm a monthly. Tim Mills, who runs that, he does interviews with people in music, some people in within the horror community, and then every month there's 4 of us to get together and we just do a roundtable discussion.
Awesome. It's a really fucking fun show. I've been checking it out. It's awesome. I've been talking with Tim earlier today, so might have a small announcement on a wider scale that's not necessarily to do with this show, but more to do with our sort of network of shows that we're a part of. So hopefully there'll be something in the pipelines there. But definitely go check out Horror Flicks and Guitar Picks. Follow Wren on the social medias. He's always got very insightful things to say, which is, you know, as I said, in total has probably contributed. You've probably contributed, aside from myself and Nico, obviously, you've probably contributed more to this show than anyone else who's ever listened to the show. So
Yeah,
it's a fun show. So
check that.
It's
out.
a fun show. So, and you guys keep me busy during the day. So I greatly appreciate the content you guys put out. So.
Wow, we definitely appreciate you. Nico, you are obviously very familiar with our leaderboard.
Yes.
It is that time of the episode where you need to predict. This is our 74th movie that we're reviewing on the show. Sorry, you need to predict where you think this is going to go on the leaderboard.
See, this one's a tricky one because, like, I normally judge this on how I've spoke to folk, and you know how I normally do it. And this has genuinely been 50-50 with the folk that I've been talking to. It's like the Marmite of movies. Like, you either love this or hate it. So I'm going to go slap bang in the middle. I think it's going to get a 5 out of 10.
You're going for a 5 out of 10. Slap bang in the middle. Well, that might be slap bang in the middle of the ratings. That's not slap bang in the middle of our leaderboard, however.
I know.
A 5 out of 10 would put this in 65th place of our 74 movies. So that would make it a bottom 10 movie, which I'm sure for some people they're thinking, yep, that's exactly where it belongs.
Yeah, a lot of people will be thinking that, yeah.
But for some people, you know, that's the total opposite. So okay, so we're going for a 5 out of 10. We'll see how close to being right you are. Right, okay. Let's get into the movie. This week we are talking all about Terrifier. This movie was released in 2016, was written and directed by Damien Leone, and stars Jenna Cannell, Samantha Scafidi, and David Howard Thornton. The IMDb plot is as follows. On Halloween night, Tara Hayes finds herself as the obsession of a sadistic murderer known as Art the Clown. Okay, right, let's just get the cats out of the bag straight away. Wren, you a fan of this movie?
I am not a fan of this movie. But you'll be interested to note. So I watched this again on Tuesday. It's officially the second time I've ever watched it. And my opinion is slightly changed on it. Not that I like it, but I, for the longest time, was a proponent like that this was the worst and they improved in the sequel. I am flipping my opinion on that. I think this one is now better than the sequel.
Okay.
But I still don't think it's a good movie.
That's fine. Nico, are you a fan of Terrifier?
Right, so the first time I watched this, you know me, I like the gory stuff. And I was like, yeah, I could get behind this. It was not bad. And then I rewatched it again and it got worse. And then I rewatched it again and it got worse. Now I rewatched it this time and I'm like, it's not really that good, is it?
Okay, right. So it's all right. It's not the first time I've had a 2-on-1 situation.
You loved it.
I do.
Do you want me to tell you how? We'll
get to it. We'll get to it. We'll get to it in a second.
Okay.
I am a big fan of the Terrifier franchise.
I know.
I think anyone who follows me on social media and anyone who discusses horror with me knows that I'm a big fan of the franchise. However, there are very, very clear and obvious issues. I think especially with this one. I'm very interested to see why you think Terrifier 2, there you go, Nico, is now why you now think that that's a worse movie than this one. I kind of flipped back and forth between them, because whilst obviously, they're obviously, same movies in the franchise, tonally they feel a little bit different. I think when you get to Terrifier 2, Terrifier 2 is a lot meaner than the first one. And they expand. It's a lot more gory, really. I know this is quite the gore fest. There's obvious issues. If we're just gonna boil this down to basics, there's very, very obvious issues with Terrifier with regards to the script and some of the acting and some of the effects, and there's maybe reasons for that. So I'm not sitting here saying that I think this is a perfect movie. I'm gonna give this a perfect score. However, for me, I genuinely believe that, and it is kind of coming to fruition, that Art the Clown is probably the most iconic new horror villain out there. If you take away your Freddys and your Michaels and your Jasons, who are, long established horror villains, and you take sort of new or newish IPs, as in Terrifier. Obviously, it goes beyond the original Terrifier, because Art the Clown's made his first appearance in All Hallows Eve, which, if you think Terrifier's a bad movie, please go check out All Hallows Eve, because that's something special. But yeah, I do genuinely believe that Art the Clown is the most iconic, and there's something about him that I really find myself drawn to. Nico, in terms of like the villain side of things, and then I'll let you get into your reasons behind your thoughts. Yeah. Art the Clown, I don't think there's no denying that the impact that Art the Clown is about to have on the horror community.
See, in this movie alone, right, Art the Clown is he's like that 80s gory, like basically what this is an 80s gore fest, but with better special effects and a villain that talks less, and that benefits him because he does seem more terrifying because he does less. He's just butchering them, that's it. Like, there's nothing really scary about him, but it's your own imagination that does that, and we've talked about this before.
Yeah, well, exactly, that's it. Like, because we've always mentioned, and we've said it so many times on the show in previous episodes, less is more. And you get that with the fact that, Art the Clown doesn't talk. But it's this really weird sort of juxtaposition, because, whilst you still get that less is more in terms of the things he's saying, you get very much on the more side about what he is doing. There is nothing hidden about what he's doing. So you get this really weird position where, you're getting virtually no information, but you're seeing so much of the ramifications of what he is doing. And it's a really sort of difficult thing, I think, to sort of comprehend. You go back to your other sort of silent killers, and we're going to, you go back to sort of Michael and Jason, because they're probably the two most iconic of your silent killers. And whilst there's a certain level of brutality, and we do get a bit of gore, for the large part in those movies, they're not setting out to be as brutal and as gory as this movie is. So there's a lot you still don't see. There's a lot that is still suggested and still maybe happens slightly off camera and things like that, and trickery. Whereas here it's bombarded at you, from that, and that doesn't even just extend to Art the Clown as well, because even in that opening scene, the first real bit of gore in this movie isn't even performed by Art the Clown. It's during that interview scene or post-interview scene where we really get that first piece of gore. But obviously the majority of it is performed by Art the Clown. Wren, in terms of like from a pure villain perspective, where do you think Art the Clown is going to sort of rank for you? Is he a villain that's maybe too good for his franchise, or do you think he actually kind of fits and he's not that great?
No, I think he's an interesting one. I kind of have how do I feel about him, because I don't know anything about him, because this movie in particular sets it up that and even Terrifier 2 kind of plays on it. Is he human or is he not human? Like, what is his and like like with Michael Myers, like he's just evil. There's nothing about him. And that's what makes Michael Myers like absolutely terrifying, is that he's just like a void with a human shell. With Art though, like it bothers me that I can't pick out like what he is, if he's human or if he's not, because this whole movie he's human until like the very end, and then you're kind of like, well, wait a minute, that kind of like throws me off. As far as the character itself, though, I think he's a cool character. I think clowns in general can be really terrifying because they're supposed to look like inviting, and he does that smile, and that smile's like David Howard Thornton's smile is awesome, like with the teeth effects and all that stuff. I think Art could be a great villain. And I wouldn't label him as iconic yet until Terrifier 3 comes out. Once Damon Leone has like a real budget and he can do some like real damage with Art, I think that's when he's gonna like push himself, because I don't think he's hit mainstream yet. I think for us, like us horror fans that like live and breathe the genre, like we know who Art is. And if you like this stuff, you can be like, Art's iconic. He's in there with the Freds and Michaels and Jasons and all that stuff. But I don't think he's crossed over to that threshold yet to be like mainstream. Once he's mainstream, which Terrifier 2 was so successful here on a word of mouth, that I think once Terrifier 3 comes out, I think now Art the Clown is going to be like a frequent Halloween costume right next to your Pennywises. So I think he's got just one more movie before he becomes like in that icon level.
Yeah. And we already...
I think you're right about that. About that's how you can define if it's going to be a stay true villain that everyone knows about and is a mainstream. Is the Halloween costumes. That's what I was going to bring up. This year, I've got a funny feeling you'll see a few people dressed as it. Whilst last year, you'd see one or two people, and as you say, the horror fans would go up and go, "Nice art," But everybody else would be like, "Why? Who's this scary clown? Is it Killer Clowns from Outer Space or something?" They'd throw back to a different one, and try to guess which one it would be.
And you're obviously mentioning about hitting that mainstream. We already know that Terrifier 3 is gonna have, even if it, listen, even if that movie bombs, it's going to have that much more mainstream access, because we already know that, at least in the US, it's going to get a wide cinema release, which Terrifier 2 didn't. Terrifier 2 got that limited release. And like you said, due to the success of it through word of mouth and through the horror fans who went to see it on social media, etc., that's when it got extended and got a slightly wider release, but it was still a very limited release. And budget definitely comes into it as well. I mean, obviously we'll go into it later on, but this movie, Terrifier, its budget was in the region of like $30,000. So it's no money to make a movie. That's absolutely no money. And then even when you go to Terrifier 2, the budget for that one was only around $250,000, which again, given the sort of scale of that movie as well, because that movie is well into the 2 hours plus, and the set pieces are bigger, and they've gone bigger and badder. I think they achieved quite a lot in that movie for $250,000. There is obviously no actual firm figures, I think, yet on the budget for Terrifier 3, but it is rumored to be significantly larger than...
Even if it gets $1 million, that's going to do a lot for Damon Leone and what he can do with that movie.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess, regardless of how you feel about the final product of the movie and whether you think, Terrifier as a franchise is good or not, one thing I don't think you can ever sort of criticize about it is the sort of creativity and what they've managed to achieve with the really limited funds that they have.
Well, yeah, I think Damon Leone is an amazing filmmaker in regards of what he's able to do, like how he's what's the word I want to use? I mean, he does all the effects himself. So he's a writer, director, he does all the effects himself. And the fact that he's like that jack of all trades gives him, like, I bump up like my respect level for it. Like I said, I don't necessarily like the movie itself, but with what Damon Leone, like, I would love to see Damon Leone get a real budget with a real studio behind him to see what that guy can do, because I think the brains are there. I think he has the knack for making something. Yeah. I think he's just limited by his own resources.
Well, yeah, as well, like you say, obviously, he is the writer, he's the director, he's a special effects guy, he does all his own special effects. I think he got a Fangoria Chainsaw Award this year, right, for best special effects, which it's a pretty big deal. And Terrifier actually picked up Terrifier 2, actually picked up a few different awards at the Chainsaw Awards this year. So it is starting to get, much more widely recognized. I think maybe sometimes though the fact that he does wear hats, and like I say, you got to give him big kudos and big respect for he clearly has this vision for the franchise.
Yeah.
He clearly has this massive story that he wants to tell and have all these tie-ins, and he's going to do that through being the writer and the effects and the director, etc., etc. But I do sometimes feel like that might just be a detriment to it as well. I think if you got, especially I think when you look at the script, because I think when you're talking to people, or a lot of people that I've talked to anyway, who maybe aren't such a big fan of this, the script does seem to be the one thing that everyone sort of brings up as that could have been a lot stronger. And I think it's probably the most evident here in the first movie. Everyone understands that if you've got a budget of $35,000, the effects are going to be what they're going to be, right? You can only do so much with that money. And, we've talked about, you want to have that big budget to see exactly what he can achieve. But there is just that little bit more of a sort of an accepting, I think, from horror fans that, if you've got a budget that's that low, then the effects.
The effects are actually pretty decent, I thought.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
So, seeing what you could do with a bigger budget is brilliant. But on the flip side of that, there's no real story to this movie, right? You've got a killer clown, that's it. And you said about the script and all that. This is not the best scripted. Like, do not get me wrong. As a one-off, watch this, you'll love it. Because it is a proper throwback to the gore fest you used to get from the 70s and 80s. But ask me to name any of them, and I can't, because they're easily forgettable. They're just there for the gory effects.
Okay. But do you think this is going to be forgotten?
See, this is the thing that's slightly different with this movie, right? You've got a decent villain, right? The less is more. He's coming across as actually scary. In this, right enough where it's the whole thing at the end where it's in the morgue, you're like, you should have left it like he was human or something and just done a backstory instead. I think made it more scary, instead of this evil resurrected thing.
Which I get, the whole sort of supernatural plot line and being resurrected, that's not a plot line that's gonna be for everyone. But Nico, you are someone who wants to know everything.
Yeah, but no, don't get me wrong, right? The resurrecting thing works because it works if you're building a franchise. But build your franchise first before you start doing the resurrection thing, throwing in it. You know what I mean?
I mean, again, I know obviously it's a movie that not a huge amount of people might have seen, or even less people have seen. If you've seen All Hallows Eve, Art the Clown is a supernatural being. Now, technically, All Hallows Eve is not canon to what is going on. I don't know, sorry, just to interrupt, if you guys can hear, there's so much noise happening outside my door and window right now, so if that's coming across to anyone, I really do apologize. Yeah, so I don't know, like, it's just one of those things, because I feel like this movie clearly has so many things that are going for it. It's got so much going for it. As a franchise, this has got so much going for it, but it just feels like there's something, especially with this movie, just kind of holding it back from being great, or for some people being good. Nico, you said there that Art the Clown's got this sort of scary effect, but then I've had people be like, well, no, he's not scary at all. It's one of those. I just think it's such a subjective one, and it's such a difficult one to judge.
We better touch on it. This is totally like the most misogynistic killer ever. As well.
It's funny you mentioned that, because I did have it down as one of my. But there has been not just accusations of misogyny. There's also been accusations of transphobia towards sort of Damien Leone. I think specifically with regards to him killing the homeless lady in this movie, and the violence against women in general in this movie. And I'm sure as three men on this podcast, we're perfectly placed to talk about this. But Damien Leone has come out in interviews and has defended his position and said, that's never what he really intended, and it's just sort of the way it landed. And I think he made moves to try and sort of rectify that in T2. I don't know, like, Wren, do you think this comes off as a particularly sort of misogynistic movie?
The only scene that I think that people have any kind of argument there is like the fucking the scene of the movie when he saws that woman in half, vagina first.
Yeah.
That's a pretty brutal scene. I get I mean, that's never been done before, so I gave him credit for being like, wow, like
it was done the year before.
Was it really?
Yeah. What was the name of the movie again?
Oh, it must have been really good, Nico, because you can't even.
Yeah.
No, it was like Kurt Russell. It was like a Western thing.
Oh,
Okay.
that Bone Tomahawk.
That's the one.
Yeah,
No, not that
I've
one.
not seen that.
Is that one?
That's...
I think it was that one.
Okay.
It was a Western anyway. I remember that.
Okay, well, I don't remember that either. So in terms of
but yeah, everyone talks about Terrifier.
It's almost scene for scene like that, just straight down the middle there.
Okay. But anyways,
well, I don't hear anyone talking about that, so I'm giving Terrifier the credit for it. But regardless, I think
it definitely was.
Regardless, I think that's the only scene that they can really, because I mean, if you go back to like every 80, because this is definitely a nod to the 80s slasher, it's very much in vein of that. I think most of the victims go to like, Friday the 13th, like most of the victims, I mean, don't get me wrong, Jason totally kills men, but like half the people he kills are topless women. Like, so like, I don't necessarily think that Jason was misogynist. I think, it just landed that way that, they killed women. So I don't get from Damien Leone that he's a misogynist. I think that, like he said, I think it unfortunately landed maybe that way for people. But other than that one scene, I don't really see anything that, stands out as misogynist. I mean, I guess maybe they could have had one or two more male characters in it that would die, but they do. They have the pizza guys. They have the guy who was spraying for the bugs and whatnot. So I mean, there are male victims.
Yeah, I mean, there's actually more male victims in this movie than there are female victims, because you've got the two.
When they do the male victims, though, it's over in seconds.
Well, this is
like he's taking pleasure in hurting women. That's what I'm speaking about.
I'm not disagreeing with you. This is what I'm saying. If you're looking at it to try and sort of find where it lands on the balance, yes, there are more male victims. There are 4, I think, male victims. Actually, more than that when you take into account the morgue scene in the end. So I think there's actually 5 male victims in this movie. You've got the 2 pizza guys, the 2 pest control guys, and then the guy in the morgue at the end. When in actual fact, there's only 3 female deaths in this movie, with the 4th surviving, in the end. So, however, like you say, Nico, it is a case of when the male characters die, it's over in seconds, or it's a decapitation and turned into a jack-o'-lantern, or it's getting your head pulled off or whatever. However, the kills on the women are so much meaner, and
and he's enjoying it. You can see he is thriving on it. The male ones, it's like, I'm getting rid of him, he's just in the way, whilst the female ones, it's like he's getting off on it.
Yeah, no, like he's like we've mentioned, obviously there's the sawing in half scene, even, and then obviously, scalping the homeless lady and cutting off her breasts. The kills for those are much more overtly sexual than the kills for the men. And like I say, I do think he does try to rectify that somewhat in Terrifier 2. I think, there's a character in there that initially gets killed by being stabbed in the penis, and various other aspects of the movie. So there is this, but like you were saying, Wren, that's very much also a callback to the 80s, and the sort of style of movies that we were getting back then as well. And I think that we're gonna get this sort of throwback movie straight away from the very beginning, when you get that sort of tooling up scene as well, which is obviously a very, that really reminded me of A Nightmare on Elm Street, when you get that scene at the very beginning where Freddy's, creating the glove, and so there's definitely those sort of callbacks there, with regards to the movie. If we're gonna talk about, if we're gonna get into this movie and talk about maybe some more actual specifics of the movie rather than the impact of the movie as a whole, because obviously we've all kind of highlighted that we think the script is probably a bit of an issue when it comes to this movie, and maybe some of the choices that are made by characters have been slightly controversial, or people just don't really understand. And one of the big things that always gets brought up to me when we're talking about Art the Clown and sort of character choices is his use of a gun. Because I've heard the argument from so many people that they feel like that was really cheap and lazy writing. And I personally am not of that opinion, but I want to get your guys' opinion first about how you feel about the use of the gun when he's killing Tara specifically. I don't know, like, how do you feel, Ren, that that's a good use of the character, or do you feel that was, sort of a cheap and it came off as cheap and lazy?
I can understand the cheapness of it, especially since he's so like personal with how he kills. But I also, even just looking at his face, how like just annoyed he was when he did it. Like I think that was it's kind of like the one thing that we've always asked of our heart. Like, why chase him? Why not just find a gun and shoot the
Yeah.
victim? Like, and I feel like
Yeah.
he got so like upset dealing with her that he was just like, fine, I'm just gonna shoot you. Like, I don't have time to play with you anymore. I'm just gonna shoot you, and I'm gonna shoot you a bunch of times. I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna shoot you more. Like, I think that showed like the one of the few pieces of depth to art in this particular film is that he got frustrated, like, and he just was like, fine, I'm gonna just do this now instead of killing you the way I wanted to, instead of toying with you. I'm moving on from you. I'm gonna shoot you, and I'm gonna get there. I thought that was kind of neat because you never see that. You never see that with any of the horror victim or horror villains in the past. When you thought in your head, you're like, why don't you just shoot these people? Like, it'd be so much faster instead of chasing them and getting beat up all the time. Like, just shoot. And I don't know. I that's one scene I actually like, kind of. I wouldn't say I liked, but like I kind of was like, okay, that's new. That's something that we all think, but like never happens. And art just gets frustrated. Like I think David Howard Thornton, that's his name, right? I think I think he sells that scene really well just by his pure like disgust on his face. Like I think it says to me that Art's even mad himself that he's resorting to using the gun. Like he would much rather use like literally anything else at his disposal. But so I don't hate that scene. I don't actually think I can see why people would think it's cheap, because you're getting this whole like gore fest, like personal with like knives and saws and all that whole stuff. But in this one, he just shoots her. Like, I can see where people would be upset if you were looking for something else, but I particularly like that, or didn't find any problems with that scene.
Yeah, I quite like that scene too for exact same reasons. I liked it because it's the way he just shoots her and then goes back and then shoots her again.
Yeah.
It's just it is one of those things where it's like, as you said, he's done it and he's like, fuck.
Yeah.
Oh well, I'm gonna make a mess now. Fuck you.
Well, yeah, no, because
And
I agree with the pair of yous as well. Like, I'm in the exact same boat, and it's exactly as you say, Dan. I like the fact that it's very clear that Art doesn't want to kill his victims this way, but it gives that sort of extra layer to the character, because even though he doesn't want to do it, he still carries that gun with him, just in case he needs to. And in that particular scene, when he first shoots Tara, that's when she's starting to get sort of one up on him as well. And, at that point, we don't know as a viewer that Art the Clown has any sort of supernatural capabilities. So her getting the sort of one up on him, and bearing in mind that the fact at this point in the movie, we still believe that Tara is also our final girl, when, that's actually not the case. So, you could genuinely be believing, okay, is she actually going to get the better of him? No, because he's actually willing to do whatever it takes. He's played with her for long enough, because, he tormented her by making her watch Dawn be sawn in half. And even before then, he was sort of fake trying to hit her with the hammer and, sort of taunting her. But now that she's away to start potentially getting the upper hand, I'm just going to fucking shoot you in the face. Yeah, I really like that layer to the character.
It's honestly like one of the only real like layers, like, because this script is like paper thin. It's really like one of the only things you get out of Art for a while, until like obviously he like reveals that he's supernatural. But like, other than that, he's just this demented clown like killing people. And until that, like, you really don't get much. I think it gave him like his personality.
Yeah.
Like, I think I understood Art the Clown more by when he did this, like, oh, I'm resorting to the last ditch effort of just shooting you.
Yeah.
Like, I think this is like one of the only spots in the plot where it like isn't as thin where it is like everywhere else, I think.
Yeah. How did you guys feel about the sort of fake out with the final girl? Because we do, the character of Victoria, who's Tara's sister in this, obviously, we get the phone call from her earlier, but she kind of drops back out of the movie and doesn't show back up again. We do genuinely believe, or at least I did, that Tara was going to be our final girl. Is that a sort of a twist that worked, or did it just sort of fall flat?
I think it sort of fell flat because it don't get me wrong, it came out of left field. It was a bit of a twist, but it was just meh. Like, it was over and done with way too quickly. It's just I've drawn it out a little bit more, I think.
Well, you think we should have had Tara survive longer into the movie before meeting her demise?
No, I just think it, like, well, yeah, pretty much. I think I was trying to put a better word, but
you
yeah,
were just
pretty
trying
much.
to, Nico. You were just trying to find a way to not agree with me. I know how you.
Pretty
I
much,
know
yeah.
how your mind works.
No, but it's like it's so thin on the script at that point. The twist comes out of nowhere that you're just like, I'm over it.
I mean, how do you feel about it, Wren?
I thought it felt a little flat too, just because that, like, as much as I just gave that scene credit for like giving some layer to art, I don't think that should have happened to Tara as who we thought was our final girl. I thought that was kind of a abrupt ending to her story.
Yeah.
I thought that I don't know how I would have written it because I don't write horror movies, but like I just felt like that it was over in a gunshot, like it was real quick, and like I feel like, and the fact that the sister like wasn't on scene yet for that, like I don't know, like I feel like I think she deserved like a better death, or like a more surprising, like the gunshot was surprising, but like not in the sense that, like, you've seen final girls die, like trying to think of Dream Warriors, when Heather Langenkamp finally gets it, like that's a perfect like twist, like we're gonna kill like the final girl from like the first one. I didn't get that at all, like I'm not even close on this one. I'm not, like I said, I'm not mad about like the whole gun use of a gun or whatever, but I felt like killing off the final girl, what we thought was the final girl, that way was kind of a little bit of a cop out. Like I think she should have got like more of a glorious death, so to speak.
Yeah.
More of a fight, basically, is what I'm trying. Was
Okay.
the words I was trying to use.
Okay.
Like her biting the bullet, no pun intended, is just you'd have liked to seen her fight back more.
No, I definitely get that, and I do agree. Tara up until this point has been our main character, and our main sort of hero, and yeah, it's a very sort of undignifying death. There's no real, but that kind of fits in with the sort of tone of the movies for me, because these are nasty movies. These are not nice movies. These are not movies that are really going to linger, I think, on sort of sentimental value of the characters that we have on screen. More so, I think, less so, sorry, when you get to Terrifier 2, because it does look like sort of Sienna, who's our main hero in Terrifier 2, is going to be like this big centerpiece of the franchise now. However, I think what really sort of, so the death of Tara didn't really bother me that much. I quite like the twist of, oh, here we go, it's actually going to be somebody else that we've got to root for. I think my issue then came with, we had no connection to Victoria and the character, because up until that point all we had was that one phone call really from between them to say, oh, can you come pick us up, and that's really all we got. There's absolutely no connection to the character. We don't even know if we like this character, whether or not we even want to root for her to be our final girl. At least with Tara you can make the decision, right, am I going to root for her, or am I actually just going to be that person that roots for the villain? And then it sort of left me in limbo a little bit for the sort of final portion of the movie.
No, I agree with you, because I think Tara, like, again, there's not much character development for any of the characters in this. But with Tara, at least like there's a little bit, like her friend's really drunk, bothering her about the night. She had a rough night with like that guy that was hitting on her. There's like a little bit of stuff, and she just wants to go home, but she can't go home because they drank too much, and they're just trying to do whatever they can. And she's just constantly getting annoyed by like the friends now inviting Art to like, like she's messing with him. Like there's like a whole bunch of, you're like, man, let's let this girl get out of here, because like the whole time she was just trying to go home, and now she's got this like maniac trying to kill her. So like I think there was like we had like character development for her, and you could root for her to get out of that situation, because she really just was just trying to go home. And but with the sister, we don't, like, the only emotional connection you have is, shit, she's probably going to run into her, she's probably going to see her sister's body, and that sucks. And that's about all you're going to get from whether or not we have any kind of connection to this girl. But like you said, we don't know if she's an asshole or if she's, you know, a good person. Now she's like the good older sister that's like, you know, trying to go pick up the pieces. Like we don't have anything for that. So like once Tara's out of the picture, like I kind of really, that's where I really like gave up my investment in the film the first time I watched it. Cause I'm like, what are we watching now? Like,
Yeah.
like I don't know who to. I can't root for Art because he's so mean. But who do I root for this girl? Like, do I even give a shit? Like that's one of the things that why I don't like this movie is because like once Tara's out of the picture, I really don't have a reason other than to see if they can kill Art.
Yeah.
Like there's no real investment in the movie anymore for me.
Yeah. I mean,
like there's not even killing her in front of her sister. You know what I mean? There's nothing.
And
really
I have no qualms with killing off, like having that like red herring. Like I have no problems with them killing off Tara. There was not, as you said, there's no connection to this sister like whatsoever. So I don't know how to. I really don't know. I didn't really know how to feel. Like any kind of emotional connection I had to that film ended when Tara died.
Yeah,
and I was just waiting for it to be over at that point.
Yeah, no, there's absolutely no issue, like I say, with killing Katara off, giving us that sort of red herring plot twist of, you know, you've been rooting for this girl, but she's actually not the one that we're focusing on. But you need to have that other character there to back her up, to come to the fore, that, like you say, we're going to relate to. I'm that guy that I just ended up rooting for Art the Clown, because, you know, that's that's just sort of my taste.
Misogynistic bastard.
But like I say, it is obviously something that, as they've went on in the franchise, that they are clear that it feels very much right that Damien Leone's made this movie. You know, it's kind of landed where it's landed. If it was a success, that's fine. We can go on and we can kind of try and fix some of the issues with that movie, because some of these issues that we're talking about, I think, have kind of been addressed a little bit in Terrifier 2. And, you know, I think Terrifier 3, the rumor is that we're going to start getting a lot more of that sort of backstory. I'm a member of quite a few different sort of Art the Clown Terrifier groups, you know, on social media, and the fan theories on some of those groups are just, they're out there, they're wild, and, you know, they're definitely. I'm really interested in on that point, but since I've just brought it up, Wren, you obviously said, you know, initially you thought Terrifier 2, you know, maybe it was slightly above Terrifier, but you've sort of swapped opinions.
Yeah, so my first run through of Terrifier, I was like, well, I watched that. I didn't like it. I'll never revisit it again. And then I heard they made a second one. When I heard they made a second one, I was like, how? Like, really? Like, I was perplexed that enough people cared that the director would even go back to. But apparently it does really well at like the horror cons. Like that's where I saw like people like walking around with like, even I don't even know if they were bootleg versions of the Blu-ray or DVD, but there was definitely like people walking around with art stuff. And then when Terrifier 2 came out, I gave in the peer pressure. The guys that over at Horror Flicks and Guitar Picks, like they're like, no, you gotta watch it. And I kept telling them, I was like, when it comes to me, like I'm not going to the theater, I'm not paying for it. So it finally dropped on whatever it dropped on Amazon Prime, I guess, and I watched it, and I was like, all right. I felt like at the time they fixed what I was looking for. I wanted a plot. I wanted some things to be a little bit more drawn out. Like I wanted to get like more of a story. Like I'm not a person that can go into a film and not get a plot. Like, and people say like, oh, well, why did you watch this movie? Like you don't watch Terrifier for a plot. And I'm like, well, I watch every movie for a plot. I want to escape. Like I want to go to this like fantasy world. And so I watched the second one and I didn't think it was great. It lingers on on too many scenes. The bedroom scene just doesn't do it for me. It's just too long. It would have been more effective if it was shorter, but I don't want to talk about that too much. So once it was done, I was like, all right, this is the better film. The budget was bigger. The acting was slightly better. There was a plot. But then I went back and watched this one this week, which is the second time I've ever watched it. And I'm like, even with the paper thin plot, I felt like he gets to the point better with this one. I think the fact that it's only like 90 minutes, I think that works in his favor. I don't think Terrifier movies should be 2 hours long. I think he was able to say what he wanted to say in Terrifier 1 better than he was able to say it in Terrifier 2 because he drugged Terrifier 2 out too much. So I think that him condensing it, I think 90 minutes works for him. Anything longer, like it's too long. Like he stretched plot points out too long. So that's why I think that Terrifier 1 is better than Terrifier 2, because I think he contained himself the right amount for Terrifier 1 than he did in Terrifier 2.
I mean, even though I agree with you, and I'm coming as someone who is a fan of the franchise. I definitely think the Terrifier 2 is way overdrawn. I even think that
too long.
This one is also overdrawn. You know, I think this could have really done with just being a really one of those movies is just like a really tight, like 80 minutes. Just absolutely to the point, because you're here for you're like you say, people don't watch this movies for the plot, right? However, me and Nico, we've talked about it many times before about these kind of movies that you put on as your sort of popcorn movies, as your movies to switch your brain off. I'm going to go watch someone get absolutely splattered all over my screen. And there's obviously the place for those movies inside the sort of horror world. You don't want that to get drawn out and taken to over 2 hours. And even at some points during this movie, I do feel like, right, okay, come on, let's keep this rolling, a little bit. But even still, I still feel like for those movies, you still have to have some semblance of a plot that Terrifier really just doesn't, does it?
Yeah.
Nico?
Yeah, same sort of thing. I thought the second one was just way too long. It's just too drawn out. It's just pretty much everything you just said. To be honest, I've got to agree with. The first one, it worked. I could have seen the first one being slightly longer just to build the character a bit more, to actually give it a bit of a story instead of just being like that.
But if they had done that, then it would have justified it. We're talking about, at least I'm talking about, this is 90 minutes and that's perfect for your sort of the style of movie you've got. If you want to add an extra 5-10 minutes, but actually give us, character development, actually give us a bit of a plot, then that's great, because you're actually changing what this movie is somewhat, and you're turning it into something that could be, easier to sort of build a world around.
Yeah, that's what I would have preferred.
Yeah.
I mean, 5 more minutes on the sister, and I think this movie would have been. I probably would have a lot more positive things to say about this if just to give us a reason to connect with who ends up being the final girl. Like, I want to, like, if we get that, I think it changes my opinion on this movie.
Yeah.
So 5 minutes on the sister, that's all we would need.
So 5 minutes of Chris Jericho. That's what this movie needed.
Yeah.
No, but you're right enough. Like, there's no connection to that sister whatsoever.
No.
And like 5-10 minutes, even her walking in and killing her sister would have done it. You know what I mean? Or her finding the bodies. Fucking, it would have been something.
Yeah, because it's the body of Dawn that she finds. It's not even the body of her sister, is it?
Exactly.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, you kind of the one sort of emotional connection that this character really has, because we don't even know how the relationship is between Tara and Vicky. Like, they obviously have some sort of a relationship. They're in contact. She's coming to go collect her, but she might not even like Dawn. Like, I'm sure, as someone who has siblings, you don't necessarily like all the people that your siblings and your friends are also friends with, so we know the relationship between those two characters even less. There's also the fact that during the time before, obviously, Art really starts his rampage earlier in the film, like you were mentioning earlier, Ren, the character Tara, she really just wants to go fucking home, and these two don't even seem like they get on that well, to be honest, because they're kind of bickering at each other the entire time, and they really just seem like they're bugging the shit out of each other. Like, they really seem to be annoying each other, which to me didn't really help me sympathize with either character at all as well. It probably pushed me towards, again, rooting for Art the Clown, because I actually just ended up finding the characters a little bit irritating for what little we actually got on them. So it came to the point where I did just kind of want to see them, splattered across my screen. And I think that's probably why in the end I've came to sort of really enjoy the franchise as a whole, and these movies. I'm not in these movies for our heroes. I'm in these movies for Art the Clown.
Like, she sets herself up to be his victim when she's just sitting on his knee taking the picture and all that stuff, and you can tell a mile away that that's the one you're going to probably enjoy getting killed the most.
Yeah.
because she seems like a bit of a cunt.
One of the things I want to talk about, I want to know if either of you think that this potentially could be a sort of reason why Terrifier, the first one, did become the sort of phenomenon it did. Because this movie was released, I don't know if either of you remember, when we did kind of have that great clown panic. Do you guys remember? It was all over the news and there was just like random people just dressing up as clowns and scaring the fucking shit out of people. I think it was happening in the States, and it was happening here.
There was a guy who got shot for it, remember?
Yeah, that's right. And this movie came out right around that time. Do you think that might have actually contributed to the success of this film?
Oh, hell yeah.
Okay, Nico.
Well, a guy, like, if you're seeing, like, videos of folk standing there and folk running for a mile, like, the one that got shot at a basketball game, he's just, there's all these guys playing basketball, and the guy, instead of running like everybody else, pulls out a gun and fires a couple of shots at the guy, and the next thing you know, you see this clown go down. Like, just in the camera shot, you see the clown go down, and that's real life, and it's happening when this is coming out, and it's being released in the news. It's going to affect movie sales.
Yeah. Well, that's it. It's once again, it's one of those movies that's managed to sort of capitalize on what's going on in the minute, and whether it was intentional or not, I'm not 100% convinced it was intentional. I would need to know a bit more about, you know, when I know for a fact that, you know, going back to All Hallows Eve, and then I think it was 2011 that the actual short, because this is based off a short called Terrifier, I think it came out in 2011, so that's when we were really introduced. So, you know, it is just sort of a happy accident that happened. But it's, again, taking advantage of those things that are happening in society at the time. You know, you're going back to your Blair Witches and that sort of marketing ploy, because, you know, the internet wasn't a great, like, was very different back then. And, you know, even going back to sort of like 2020, Host, the pandemic movie that takes place on a Zoom call, you know, taking advantage of, you know, what's going on at that time. And those movies, you know, Blair Witch definitely, Host, you know, maybe slightly less so now that we're sort of out of the pandemic, but those movies that do seem to sort of capitalize on what's going on around the world at the time do seem to have a bit more longevity. And, you know, even if there's issues with it, people just do seem to be a bit more willing to forgive those.
I will say this, and I don't know how it affects your like horror circle. I know that a lot of people saw the first Terrifier because they thought they were watching the movie Clown, the Eli Roth movie. So there was a lot of like controversy. Like I know more than one person. Well, I know like a bunch of people that watched. They wanted to watch one, they watched the other, and then they were like, "Oh shit, that's not the movie," and then they watched the other. So like they ended up watching both of those clown movies because they thought that they were the other. They thought they were the other one.
Yeah.
And so I wonder, I mean, I don't know if that's like an overall like arching theme, and like Terrifier really benefited that Eli Roth did a movie before, but I just in my own like circle of friends, like I know, you know, like at least a handful that watched the wrong movie. Yeah. They were watching Clown, and then Terrifier's now in their thing. Like they went and saw Terrifier 2 in the theater and like loved this franchise because it was like a happy accident.
I was thinking sometimes as well, and I think this probably is something that can apply to most horror fans as well. It is, you know, when you do stumble upon something that, you know, you're maybe unaware of, or, you know, not a lot of people know, or is relatively low budget, there is that kind of, you know, it's like those people who are like, oh, well, I was a fan of the band before they made it big, isn't there? There's that sort of aspect to it, isn't there? Like, you know, people stumbled upon Terrifier when, you know, it was just this really low budget thing, no one really knew about it, and it comes in and there's this sort of really unique and interesting looking villain, and there is that sort of like small group feel about it, then that I think has also probably benefited it as well. Having said that, just on your point there, Clown is actually I think a pretty decent movie. I actually think that's not too bad a clown movie, actually.
I like it, but I think I just know that both of them have on the cover is the clown. Yeah. Like that's the cover art. So like I can see where people made that mistake. I knew which one was which, but like I had more friends that are like, dude, I watched that movie. It's not anything like what you said it was. And I was like, what did you watch? And then they like showed me and I was like, that's because it's not the same movie. So
Yeah, I mean,
So I just would be curious because Eli Roth packs, a punch with his name. So I'm wondering if, how many people went to actually see Clown,
yeah,
saw a clown on the cover, and they're
and
like, oh yeah, it's that movie, and then they
yeah,
just watched it.
I mean, I'm sure there is, that's definitely played a factor. One of the things that I think as well, because the year after Terrifier came out, and on a similar theme, you also had It Chapter 1
Yeah.
come out, obviously, which features Pennywise the Clown, who, and as a franchise, obviously, given that the miniseries from the 90s and Tim Curry, and you've got Bill Skarsgård in here, and you've got, just this sort of giant cast and significantly bigger budget, but there does seem to have just been that sort of craving in that sort of time period from the sort of mid-teens to the late teens for clown horror. It was having its moment. And
Killer clowns, yeah.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. I mean, it had been a really long time since we had, quote unquote clown horror. So yeah, so I mean, you might as well tap into a resource that we haven't used in a while. Instead of beating us over the head with zombies.
Yeah, well, that's it as well, because, like I say, you obviously got It, which is a serious horror movie. You've got Clown, which is a serious horror movie. But then you've got Terrifier. So, and if you look at the three in terms of, depending on what kind of horror fan you are, obviously, if you look at financially, It far surpasses, Terrifier in terms of financial success.
Better Clown as well.
But that was
Who said that?
Well, no, because again, if you look at sort of the cover, I think it's on the cover art for the DVD of Terrifier. On it, it's like makes Pennywise look like Krusty the Clown. So they were tapping into, here you've got this, but we're going to be so much more just nasty and brutal, and we're going to show you things that It's not going to show you, that Pennywise is not going to show you. And I think there's something to be said for that.
Well, it's also, they have two different motives. Pennywise is more psychological. He wants to prey on your fear, whereas Art just wants to butcher you. He doesn't give a shit if you're scared or not. He's just going to kill you. Whereas Pennywise needs to fuck with your brain a little bit before he actually kills you. So if you wanted just a clown that kills people, Terrifier is absolutely going to give you the, if you don't want to play any of the psychological games, Terrifier is absolutely going to satiate that desire that you have.
Yeah. Terrifier is basically torture porn with a clown.
Correct.
And that's what some people are into. Again, it's one of those things, isn't it? I think, yes, we can sit here and we can critique it, which we obviously are, about script and motives and fleshing characters out and development of the characters and etc. etc. But there are just those people out there as well who do just want torture porn with a clown. It is one of those things. Ran, you've said you've seen this movie twice now. I'm gonna assume that a third watch is not in your imminent future.
Unless I'm getting brought on to a future episode that's like a retrospect of all three of them. I probably will not watch a third version of this.
I mean, I can probably say I've watched this around 20 times now since my first viewing, and it is going to continue, along with Terrifier 2 and Terrifier 3 when it comes out. It is just going to continue to be something that's in my regular rotation. I will watch this regularly, probably every 3 or 4 months, maybe even more sometimes. And that's in spite of the issues that I have with it, because I just find Art such an entertaining character, and it's, it's weird because we talk about, people and their favorite horror villains, and I've talked to people on other shows, when I've gone on to, House That Screams, who, I know very well, Ren, you've made your appearance on that show as well, and they're very much sort of Freddy or Jason folks on there. There's not really a group of them that's out of those big three that's a Michael fan, and everyone knows that Michael's my boy. But Art, aside of the fact from that neither of them speak, they're so wildly different in their sort of mannerisms and their characteristics and how they kill people. So I just I find it really interesting about myself that I find Art the Clown such an entertaining character. So there's just, I just find something alluring about the character. It just draws me in, despite the fact that there's no actual backstory there. And then even in Terrifier 2, there's very clearly hints a backstory in Terrifier 2, even if, you know, some of them are a bit more cryptic than others, and, you know, there's the fan theories that, you know, there's an actual familial link between, you know, Art the Clown and Sienna, who we get in Terrifier. Nico, you've seen Terrifier 2, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you know, there is something developed. I think. Will you go see? Will you see Terrifier 3 when it comes out?
I won't go see it, but I might wait till it comes out to stream services.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Ren?
That's exactly what I'm gonna do. I'm wait till I'm not paying for it.
Exactly. Yeah. See. Yeah. Yeah. 100%.
I'll be there day one.
You'll pay for all three of us. That's what.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. I'll pay for all three of us. It might get expensive. It might get
Boomer and go see it like 6 times in the theater.
Yeah, Boomer. I think he saw X like 7 times, and I think he's seen Evil Dead Rise a similar amount of times. That guy just likes to go see movies.
You know, as a like, I mean, you guys know my love affair with the Evil Dead series. I've seen Evil Dead Rise twice. And I like it. I like that movie. And you guys got my review last week. But yeah, it's dude, he's something else. He loves his movies.
He does. If he loves a movie, he's gonna watch the shit out of it.
That's it. Yep.
You know.
So which one did you prefer? Sorry for going off track, but which one did you prefer out of the 2 new Evil Dead?
The what?
The 2 new Evil Dead. Which one do you prefer?
Well, Ian knows my feelings on the remake. I do not like that movie at all. So Evil Dead Rise I actually really liked. That's a discussion for some other time. We can debate the remake.
Just very quickly, when we finished recording our episode on Evil Dead Rise, Nico, I immediately went and watched 2013. So yeah, I think most people are a fan. I know a few people in my horror circle who are not a fan of Evil Dead Rise. There's one particular host on House That Screams podcast who got so much flack for his thoughts on Evil Dead Rise. Yeah. But and I actually felt really bad for him because some of it went really over the top and over.
Some of the responses that he got, or one in particular, was I was like, it's just a movie.
Yeah, because at the end of the day as well, you know, his criticisms of the movie were perfectly legitimate. You know, he didn't say anything that wasn't justifiable. Yeah. You know, so it was, and you know, but some people just cross that line sometimes. So, anyways, going off on a tangent as we always do. I mean, I don't really have much else to say, to be honest with you, about this because of the things we've said earlier. You know, the script is very, very thin. You know, there is only so much you can talk about. You know, the guts and the gore of this movie. It does only really have that one scene, isn't it, that makes this. If you don't have the sawing in half scene, Terrifier 2 doesn't exist. This whole franchise doesn't exist, and you know that it is one of those things. They obviously tried to recreate that in Terrifier 2 with the bedroom scene. And Ren, you've already given your thoughts about that. You think it went on a bit too long. I kind of love that scene, but you know, that's again a discussion for another day. So yeah, like there's not much.
It felt like it was to be expected. That's what I thought.
Well, but that's it. Like, where do you go from there? Where do you go now? You know, obviously. There's the expectation that in the franchise we're now going to go and we're probably going to get, you know, some of that backstory for Art, and we're probably going to get, you know, what's Art's connection to Sienna, and you know, Victoria's still around, and there's that bizarre scene at the end of Terrifier 2, spoilers for anyone who hasn't seen that, where she births Art's head, and it's just like, what the fuck, you know, they're obviously clearly going to try and one up themselves every time. How do you one up Terrifier 2 in terms of just that batshit craziness and that gore level?
Well, you just said it. They'll just go gorier and they'll just go weirder.
But how can you, like, you know, how? I don't know. Like, it's just I don't see where it's gonna go. Personally, I think, for as much as I'm excited about Terrifier 3, I do kind of worry about it as a fan of the franchise. So it'll be interesting to see. Having said that, I'd just like to point out on a very side note that I'm also, some of these sort of groups that I'm a member of as well on social media, I also, you know, David Howard Thornton and Damon Leone and a lot of the other people who are involved in the makings of these movies, you know, they are incredible with their fans. You know, I don't know, I know there's sort of across social media, you know, the things that they do at sort of conventions and things like that, but they really do, you know, interact with their fans, and I've actually had one-to-one conversations with David Howard Thornton across social media, just simply, there was once we were trying to get him on the show, and then there was another time we were just talking about sort of movies. Like they really interact with their fans, and that's something I think, because that kind of gets forgotten about a little bit, I think, and again might be a reason why the people, especially the sort of horror fandom who are in support of these movies, really have kind of tried to push these to the fore.
But that does not settle for the fact that it's got no story.
No, I'm not putting that up as a defense.
Like, don't get me wrong, I quite like when folk interact before. I quite like publicity on films as well, but just the movie itself.
I'm absolutely in no way saying that that's a defense for where this movie falls down. I'm just saying that might be a reason why people have really tried to push for there to be a Terrifier 2. You mentioned earlier, Wren, that when you found out that their Terrifier 2 was going to be made, you were kind of like, well, why? Well, why? And it's also worth remembering that both Terrifier and Terrifier 2 Terrifier 2 especially was partly crowdfunded as well. So a lot of fan money went into the making of this.
See, I only knew about the first one because of you.
Oh,
you were the one that told me, and I was like, and don't get me wrong, when I watched it the first time, I did like it, but every time I've watched it since then, that's why I don't really want to watch it again, because I think I'll really start hating it after that. You know what I mean? It's getting worse and worse, and I quite liked it when I first saw it.
We should have reviewed this.
Does that make sense?
We should have reviewed this last year, Nico.
I'm not joking. You'd have got a better review out of me for it. You would have. I would have been more on your level with it. But the whole thing about it is, if I hadn't heard about it from you, and it is one of those niche things, like you were saying, Wren, you hear about it from people, and it passed year by year, the first one. Whilst the second one, a lot of folk have been going on about the second one, raving about it, and I can tell this is going to be a big franchise. Like, it's starting to get bigger and bigger with each movie, but it's appealing to that shitty human part of everybody. And that'll only last for so long.
No, I agree with that too, because like if you look at the movies that appeal to like the shitty human, like you take like the Hostel movies. The first one was like decent. It did pretty well. The second one was huge, and by the time they did like a third one, like no one cared anymore because people were kind of over it. So like I root for Damien Leone and his like whole team, because I love the DIY aspect. I love that they interact with their fans when they're at conventions. I've never met them, but I've seen them interact with them fans. They give their fans experiences. They don't just take the $20, sign their thing, and move on. Like, there's conversations with these people, like, and I know that Damien Leone talks about how he made certain things, like how, like someone's like, oh, how did you do this particular effect? And he's like, oh, well, you use, a 2-liter bottle of cola and you do this, that, like whatever. He like goes into detail and really gives these people experience. So like so a lot of people are pushing this movie because they're like, these are just great people that love horror, that are putting out a horror movie. They're not too big for their britches. They're not like, just here to be famous and make money. They're horror fans making movies for horror fans. And I think, and so like, I think that like I as much as I don't care for it, I want to see Terrifier 3 be successful. I want them to make a shit ton of money. It also is good for horror, for independent horror in general, because this was the horror movie that, like the little engine that could. It made, on a $250,000 budget, it made $10 million in the States in the theaters. It was so successful that it allowed movies like Skinamarink to also get a theater release. Now, I also don't like Skinamarink, but I like that there's these independent films that are now getting theater releases, and they're not caving to studios. They're doing the film that they want to make, how they want to make it, rated, unrated. It doesn't matter if they're just going to release it. And I like that about the Terrifier stuff. And I hope that Terrifier 3 is massively successful, because then it'll just say to other independent filmmakers, fuck the studios. Let's just do what we want to do.
No, that's definitely I think a key aspect of this franchise as a whole. You could, and this goes for any movie that ever comes out that gets a wide, because horror for so long has been such a maligned genre of cinema. You know, it's seen as less than, you know, by the rest of sort of Hollywood and all of that. Yeah. So you get these independent things, like you say, combining with the fact that yes, they give their fans experiences at conventions. Yes, they're not too big for their britches. They're also, you know, giving all that. They're giving you the nostalgia that people still love. They're giving people that, you know, practical effects. They're giving people that sort of 80s throwbacks, and combining all of that, like you say, if it's great for horror as a whole, regardless of how you feel about it. And like you said, you know, movies like Skinamarink that came out earlier this year, again, you know, you might not like it, but if that might encourage someone to later this year or next year release a movie that you fucking love. You know, that's
Wren just made me realize something, right? You mentioned Hostel there, right?
Mm-hmm.
It feels very similar to the way that Hostel, the first one, was. You know, it got all the same things said about it. It was misogynistic. It feels very much the similar. It was ticking all the boxes. And the second one then tried to fix all that stuff. And then the third one was forgotten about. Now, I hope they don't fall into that trap, because I'm not being a dick. The first one, all those boxes that were ticked, they were trying to fix it in the second. And then the third one, we'll see what happens.
Yeah. We will see what happens with the third one. I don't think they've gone too deep yet into actually starting to sort of write and make that film. So I think last I heard, they're aiming for a late 2024 release on that, which, you know, given that we're already halfway through 2023, you know, I don't think we'll leave them a huge amount of time to go away and, you know, write and make the movie. But again, it is one of those things, isn't it? We'll just go and see. Friend, your podcast is in the chat, right? Horror Flicks and Guitar Picks say shout out to Scott Spiegel of Intruder for directing Hostel 3. You know, we're all clearly a big fan of Hostel 3 here. but yeah, like I say, I've kind of gone over all the key topics that I want to talk about when it comes to Terrifier. I'll let you guys have the floor before we move on. Nico, is there anything else that you want to discuss about Terrifier?
Not really. Just don't watch it more than a couple of times or you'll get disappointed.
It sounds like your sex life, Nico.
I always get a return option, but anyway.
Wren, anything else about Terrifier that you'd like to discuss before we move on?
No, I think I covered it. You know, it's while I root for the franchise as a whole, it's not for me. I think that particularly. Well, I like this one more than the second one, but I think the paper thin plot, the fact that there's no connection to the final girl and stuff like that, like really, really hurts it for me. Well, I don't know. Nico had a worse experience. I had a better experience watching it the second time. Maybe I should watch it a third time to see if I actually like it. But
you're maybe going in that opposite trajectory.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. Well, obviously we'll get into our final ratings and things in a little bit, but before we do,
I should say, by the way, the second one I do prefer it, but I'm scared to watch that again in case I don't prefer it now.
You're gonna have to watch it again, because if I know Ian, you're gonna cover it. So
yeah, well, we are definitely 100%. I know that. The third one will probably have to go to cinema and see it. You know what I mean?
It's already on the schedule.
Oh, shut there. Yeah.
Anyways, right, let's move on to our next segment, and we will talk about a little bit of trivia. We kind of danced around the budgets and things and the finances of this movie. This movie did have a budget of, according to IMDb, $35,000, which, as we've discussed, is absolutely no money to make a movie on. So I think for that to have then gone and spawned, you know, the franchise that it's done, and for it to have the sort of hype that it does, you know, big kudos does have to be given to them. And, you know,
some movies spend that on catering, so I mean, yeah.
And I think the majority of that 35,000 was crowdfunded as well. You know, this was a.
I thought you were going to say catering there. I was a bit pissed myself laughing.
Yeah, Art the Clown is actually just made of cake.
Yeah.
You know, it's like that game show where I can't remember what it's called. It's like Cake or Not or whatever, where you have to figure out what's cake and what's not cake. Is it cake? Is that what it's called?
Is it cake? Get your knife out. Let's find it. There we go. That's what art is. Is it cake? No, it's a human body.
So there's the scene where Dawn's in the car by herself. There's an ambulance that drives past her. What we believe, because it's in conjunction with her listening to the radio about what gone on at the pizzeria. So we believe plot-wise that ambulance is going to the pizzeria to tend to the two guys that were killed. That was actually a happy accident. That was not planned. The ambulance just happened to go by as they were filming that scene. So, sometimes
lucky than good.
Sometimes happy accidents happen, The underground tunnels that are used in this film, I think specifically, the scene where Art is sort of coddling the baby doll. Those were actually a part of the abandoned Seaview Hospital, which was once the largest tuberculosis sanitarium in the United States. So those tunnels were actually used to transport the dead out of sight of the other patients. So they'd die, they'd be taken through those tunnels to be cremated. So nice and morbid, just like the movie.
Is the movie morbid? I just thought it was gory.
Yeah. Jenna Cannell, who plays Tara, she went a bit method as well, which I found to be a little bit interesting. With this movie, in between, the scene where she's tied up, she insisted on sort of remaining tied up in between takes to try sort of psychologically get into the feel of what it would be like. And I found that as a trivia to be a little bit interesting because
she just can't get.
I don't really feel like this is the kind of movie that, and given, what we get on screen from the final performance, this isn't really a movie where being method, I think, was called for.
She just likes being tied up. She's got a red room at home. She's fine.
Okay. David Howard Thornton himself has described Art the Clown as an evil Mr. Bean, which I think I maybe should go back and watch some Mr. Bean to see if I
thought Mr. Bean was the evil Mr. Bean.
Yeah.
It's probably because he doesn't talk and he just all of his the way he communicates is through expression of his face.
Yeah.
And Mr. Bean just kind of grunts.
Yeah.
And doesn't really.
Well, I mean,
noises, maybe.
David Howard Thornton as well. He prior to this was a mime artist. That's where he got this sort of experience, and that's where he drew a lot of the mannerisms and things. So he was kind of perfect for the role, really. He's also said,
if you're gonna have a killer clown, you want it to be a mime one day.
Yeah. He's also said he was inspired by other silent and physical actors like Charlie Chaplin, Buster Keaton, Lon Chaney, Doug Jones, and Jim Carrey as well. He's noted as being inspiration.
All of those line up.
Yeah.
I feel like I can see every one of them in him.
Yeah.
Yeah. Especially the Jim Carrey.
David Howard Thornton, the moment where he flips off Victoria after she stabs him in the foot with the railroad spike, that was not scripted. David Howard Thornton just did that for a laugh, and the crew all laughed really hard, so they decided to. Damien only was like, you know what, we're just going to keep that in. Those are the kind of fun things I think does give this movie a little bit of character, so I'm kind of glad they did that. Last piece of trivia that I've got, so I know Nico, you sort of mentioned that they'd actually done this before, not to my knowledge, but whilst they were looking for Damien Loney was looking for original horror scenes that he hadn't seen before on film. He read books about medieval forms of torture for inspiration, which is where he found the sawing in half, and was decided to put that in the film. So he saw it in a book about medieval torture.
I've got a unique one for you. So my missus is from Czech. If you go to the Prague Sex Museum, and there's a there's a torture one as well, and they're not far from each other. And the sex one's got one where they basically sit them on it, and they enjoy themselves. And then the torture one's got pretty much the same thing, but missing the dildo, and it cuts them in half. So you would have got the idea from that, pretty much.
Okay.
We have a Renaissance fair here. It's 2 hours from my house, and they have a dungeon thing that you can go into, and they talk about stuff like that. Now this is a family friendly event, and you can pay $2 to go into this little museum that's set up like a dungeon, and they have all of those things where like they sit the guy down on the spike and all that stuff. And I've gone in it like a bunch of times because I like it because it's only $2. But I've
You like
heard
the
little
spike,
kids.
do you?
I've heard little kids ask what that is, like what does that mean, and parents go and like stumble over what that there, and I'm like, that's so great. Yeah, that's what he should put in. That's what he should put in the next one. That spike.
Well, maybe, and Damon Leone, if you are listening to this podcast, just a suggestion. We don't want that much credit.
Yeah.
If you do go, if you really want some great ideas on torture, go to Czech.
Go to the Czech Republic.
Just go to Prague. You'll find it. It's advertised everywhere.
I think
you walk along the street, they hand out flyers. You know what I mean?
I think there's a few things like that in like Amsterdam and that as well, isn't there?
But it's a fact you've got the sex one and the torch one not far from each other, so you can cross it over and really enjoy himself.
I mean, it's Amsterdam. I'm pretty sure there's going to be a sex museum pretty close by.
Probably two of them.
Yeah.
You could just go window shopping.
Yeah. Anyways, that's all I've got anyway for trivia with regards to, or at least interesting trivia, I think, with regards to Terrifier. Any of you guys got anything off the top of your head before we move on?
Nope.
No.
Nope. Okay. Perfect. Let us move on to our final segment of the show. We're going to talk about the ratings and the reviews. As always, we will start off with the critics' scores. I say critics' scores. There is no Metacritic score for this movie.
Really?
They are 4 ratings short of giving it an official rating. So we only have the IMDb rating for this movie, which is a 5.6 out of 10. There is a Rotten Tomatoes critics and a Rotten Tomatoes audience rating. I'm not sure if you're aware of them, Wren. Would anyone like to hazard a guess at what they think the critics and the audience scored this movie?
I actually know what they are, so I'm not going to guess.
Okay. Nico?
It's annoying because you always reveal ones that throw me off. Because I would have said 50-50, but you said it was like 6.5 on IMDb.
IMDb was a 5.6.
Oh, 5.6. All right, I'll stick with 50-50 then.
So you're going to go and slap bang down the middle. You know what? You're not
I'll go 54, 57.
No, you're really close. The Rotten Tomatoes critics scored this 55%. The Rotten Tomatoes audience scored it 52%. So they're pretty much on a par with what they think. I think it was you, Nico, that said right at the very beginning, no, this is a Marmite movie. You love or hate this movie. There isn't really that middle ground of people who's just like, yeah,
Like everyone I've talked to, it genuinely splits straight down the middle. It's so fucking weird.
The critics' consensus, all about the splashy kills. Terrifier artfully, see what they did there, introduces the unpredictable massacre mime art, yet fails to carve an entertaining story worthy of his wrath. I think that's pretty much spot on, to be honest with you. I think they've got, as we've said, this really interesting character that's got so much potential. They just need to give him a story that's worthwhile for him. So, as always, we throw it out to our followers, our listeners across our social media platforms and asking for their opinion. This is one of the few times where I don't have one from Wren to read out.
Wren, go do one now.
Yeah. But yes, we asked for you guys for your thoughts and opinions on the movie. So we will just quickly go through a few of them. Our friends over at the House That Screams podcast, Candy, says, I will give it a 6.5. Definitely prefer the second one. Joe Muldoon gives it a 6. An enjoyable enough indie flick. Terrifier 2 was brilliant. I gave it an 8. But a bit overlong, but art really became an icon and the special effects were marvellous. Our friends over at the Movies for Days podcast gives it a 4 out of 10. The points are specifically for Art the Clown and the gore design. Everything else about this movie is terrible, boring, and unwatchable, but the artistry on display deserves huge recognition. I wish Damien Leone would find a good writer to team up with. His scripts are trash.
See, I agree with that. Like, that is how I feel about this movie.
NYC Cinema Confidential gives it a 5. Definitely a better script than Part 2. And finally, Jim's Horror Tropes gives it a 3 out of 10. Nothing fun about it. Vicious and repetitive. They improved the formula with the sequel, which is admittedly balls to the wall crazy. It is going back to what you say. It's just wild. The opinions vary so differently. I think the general consensus is that Terrifier 2 is a better movie. I think you'll find more people who are positive on that than you'll find about
I do prefer it.
that you would find about Terrifier. However, that like your thoughts, Ren, and some of those people's thoughts. I'm not saying you agree with that one, by the way. That there's someone there saying that this has a better script than Terrifier 2. The opinions are just on such a wide scale about this that it is really difficult to pinpoint, I think, for where you think the general consensus is going to be. So it's very interesting. Anyways, given all of the scores that we got in for this movie combined, that gives the listeners an average score of 6.8 out of 10, which is on the low side, I think, when you look at sort of movies that we've covered. The audience does tend to be by far and away, the most generous of the ratings. So for it to be a 6.8 is, I think, a little bit on the low side from them, but that's just my own personal opinion.
Your audience is definitely very positive on most movies. Sometimes I'm like, sometimes people are like 10 out of 10, and I'm like, all right.
yeah.
I've been there.
We have a very, our audience just has a very bright outlook on things, Anyway, so 6.8 from them. That just leaves us three. Ren, we will let you go first. On a scale of 0 to 10, what are you going to rate Terrifier?
I'm going to give this a 4 out of 10, which is probably better than I would have given it if I didn't watch this movie on Tuesday. I think the script is incredibly weak. I think that the person who previously commented about it, they wish that Damien Leone would get with a better writer, could have made this movie something much more than what it is. Art is a cool character. I think he needs to be developed a little bit more. I think he gets a little bit of that in Terrifier 2, but we're not reviewing Terrifier 2. I didn't like that we lost our final girl and had no connection at the end. Like, I think the ending falls incredibly flat. So 4 out of 10.
Awesome. Nico?
I'm going to give it a 5 out of 10. And genuinely, it seems like a very good villain to start off a franchise with. He's decent enough. Less is more, and it does work that way. The gore effects are brilliant, but everything else in it lets it down for me.
Okay.
And it's just one of those things where if you'd asked me this a year ago, it would have probably been a lot higher.
Well, that's it. But sometimes you need to give movies that breathing space, don't you? And then give it a second watch or whatever. Sometimes that's just required.
On the fourth watch, it came down a lot of points. Well, on the third watch, it came down a few anyway. But yeah.
I mean, listen, I'm a big fan of Terrifier as a franchise. I think that's been made pretty evident over the past hour and a half in the past 7 years since this movie came out. However, I am very fully aware of the flaws of this movie, and I'm not disagreeing with either of you guys for the majority of what you have to say. There's certain, and some of them's for different reasons. We talked about it. I didn't mind that they killed off Tara and then gave us a new final girl. I really liked the idea behind it, but the execution of it just wasn't there. We didn't have a connection to that character. I really wish we would have. I like that they were trying to do fresh and interesting things. It's a shame that they just didn't manage to execute them all really well. However, I do think, and I appreciate what you were saying earlier, Ren, as well, about how, maybe art's not quite there yet in terms of the mainstream and being a horror icon. I think he already is in terms of the core sort of horror fandom. I think he has already reached that status for a lot of people, and it remains to be seen whether that's going to happen with Terrifier 3 if he does reach that mainstream. I think he might. I think he has got a lot of potential to do so. And I still think there's a lot of potential in this franchise, regardless of how you feel about Terrifier and Terrifier 2. So all of those things being said, I'm going to give it a 6.5. So,
wow, that's actually lower than I thought.
Yeah, same.
I prefer Terrifier 2. I do. I prefer the second one as well. I think they do try and address a lot of the issues that people have about this movie. I think they do some of that things rather successfully. Again, there's a few things that I dislike about that movie, but there's a lot less that I dislike about that movie than I like about this one. So, 6.5. I think that's fair from someone who likes it.
I forgot it does what I fucking hate in movies.
I had this point and I hadn't brought it up yet. The majority of the movie takes place a year before the opening scene, and you hate movies. You hate movies that flashback.
And this is one of the ones where I don't think it works as well.
Well, I mean, it doesn't actually. We don't actually know it does that though until later in the film, right?
No, when they're doing the interview at the start, when she's introducing the dame.
Yeah,
she
no, I know
says
they.
from that
I know.
night.
I know they say it, but we don't know in that opening scene that that's Victoria.
Oh, you can tell it's definitely one of the victims though from that night, and you're like, yeah, it is a flashback. You can tell that straight away.
The first time I saw it, I didn't know it was her.
No, I didn't. I didn't know it was her either. Like that was a twist.
I didn't know it was her.
No,
but like
I didn't know it was a flashback. Like the whole thing.
I thought the girl on the talk show was just a former victim. And Art was out again, like he was doing it again. That's
what I thought.
Oh no, I thought it was a flashback because they're way too fucking trusting with him and all that shit. I'm like, you can blatantly tell this is a flashback. I fucking hate that.
No, I mean, well done to you if that's how you managed to read it. That's definitely not how I read it, but
yeah.
Anyways, it is what it is. All of our scores, anyway, combined.
I thought it was going to be the cat lady. By the way, I should have said that.
Oh, you thought Victoria was going to be the cat?
I thought the victim in the video at the start is the cat lady, but I was totally wrong.
Okay. Yes. Anyways, all of our scores combined with our listeners and our critics' scores gives Terrifier an average score of 5.5 out of 10. So not a million miles away, Nico, with your rating. It does mean it's not a bottom 10 movie. It puts Terrifier in 58th place of the now 74 movies that we have covered on the show. It puts it one place above Rubber and one place below Deep Blue Sea.
I'd rather watch both those movies.
Yeah, same.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if Rubber is a weird one. I don't know if I would actually rather watch that by myself. I would rather watch that movie with someone else that hasn't seen it because I love trolling people with that movie.
For anyone who has checked out Rubber, anyone who's listened to our episode on Rubber will know the absolute rage I got myself into as that episode. I started off that episode in a relatively good mood and just got more and more pissed off as the episode.
Perfect.
And by the end of it, I think I was actually red in the face by the end of it. I was furious. I'm actually, for a personal perspective, really lucky that we weren't doing video episodes at that point. We were doing.
Your heart pulping a bit.
It was honestly. I was really not happy about it. Some other movie.
That's why we get a sequel as well, by the way.
No, we're not covering it.
You made me do that one. Revenge, bitch.
I didn't make you do Rubber.
Yeah, you did.
I never picked that. You picked that.
No, you picked that.
Did I?
Yeah.
I can't imagine I'd have picked that.
We were talking about ones we hadn't seen yet, and you go, "This sounds interesting."
I thought I tried to pick Killer Sofa, but never mind.
What's the difference?
I got less angry at Killer Sofa.
Because we both hadn't watched it yet, so that's why we picked it.
Just for some other context, a couple of the other movies in the leaderboard that are around Terrifier, so a couple of places above Terrifier, you've got movies like Scout's Guide to the Zombie Apocalypse, Saw 2 and Critters, so that's just what's like above it there. Just below it,
great movies.
Just below it, you've got Silent Hill, Resident Evil, and Resident Evil Welcome to Raccoon City. You know, so I just find it a bit interesting to see where these sort of things.
I would put it below all those movies you've said so far.
Yeah, I'd probably put it below all those movies too.
Okay, fair enough.
I'd rather watch Child's Play.
Actually, I would probably keep it above Raccoon City because I was not a fan of that movie.
Oh really? I think both of us, Nico, ended up being a slightly more positive on Raccoon City than we were on the original Resident Evil movie.
Yeah.
Speaking of Child's Play, that's currently sitting in 65th place, so Terrifier's 7 places above.
Oh, Jesus.
So, yeah. And saying that you'd rather watch Child's Play, you scored that movie a 2 and gave Terrifier a 5, so... I'm just saying, Nico, I
might have to change my score for Terrifier.
You might need to change your score for Child's Play when we get to our 101st.
Might have to change my score for Terrifier.
Do you think? I think people will start messaging us. You know, if in like 100 episodes time we're still having this argument.
So Ren, do you want to go official? What's better?
What?
Is it Child's Play remake? Is it
Child's Play remake is trash.
or
But-
or Doctor Sleep?
I would rather watch Doctor Sleep. Sorry.
That's fine.
I don't think that movie's necessarily as good as Nico makes it out to be, but
That'll do. I'll take it. That'll do. I take
Genius
that.
compared to Child's Play.
I take that as a massive W. Anyways, that is going to do it for this week's show. If you are listening to us live, don't go anywhere. I'm gonna take a break for 5 minutes so that us guys here can do a debrief. But then I will be back with the second portion of the stream because I'm gonna play some games, as I always do. If you're listening to this on the podcast, thank you so much for downloading and listening to this episode. We really appreciate your support. Your support has been absolutely incredible over the past sort of 6 to 8 weeks specifically. We've kind of just exploded a little bit, which is fantastic for us to see. So thank you so much to everyone for giving us your support. Wren, thank you so much for finally being able to join us on the show. We really appreciate you having on. We will need to get you back on the show to talk about something that you like.
You should come on. You should come on when I'm on holiday.
Hold on, I gotta give you guys credit. So prior, and I wanted to do this before I got off the air. Prior to really listening to your guys' show, I used to be like a hard ass when it came to movies. You didn't like if I liked the movie you didn't like, you're an idiot to me. And vice versa. Like if it, and I was very closed-minded in how I went, and kind of not to the degree that person went at Nico from House That Screams, but I used to really give people grief about it. But at the end of the day, it's movies. Yeah. And just because I like a certain movie more than you do, or vice versa, who cares? Yeah. It's a movie. I don't have to watch the movie you like, and you don't have to watch the movie. So I changed. I really came down from that. And it's something I unfortunately see. I encounter when I go to horror conventions, or when I get deep into the horror community. You have a lot of that real strong opinions, to the point where people will argue and stop being friends with each other over something silly like a movie. Yeah. And I want to give you guys credit for a lot of my backing off of that and taking the edge off. Sometimes it still sneaks out, but but you guys specifically, and how positive you are, even on the stuff that you don't like or agree with, has changed my opinion on how I look at the way people view movies. So I want to thank you for that.
Well, we very much appreciate. We very much appreciate those incredible words, and you're absolutely right as well. There is, and listen, we all get a little defensive, don't we, about the things we love. That's kind of just sort of human nature. If there's something out there that you love that someone else doesn't, then it's in our nature, I think, to defend it. I think it's always just important to remember where the line is, isn't it? We danced around it. The abuse that our colleague over at the House That Screams got for what was simply a justifiable movie opinion was absolutely horrendous. And unfortunately, you do still see way too much of that kind of thing across social media. You see it, like you said, at conventions and things like that. Alex Vincent absolutely hates Nico.
And I'm on his side.
So yeah,
that is a funny video. So
it is still an unfortunate sort of part of the sort of fandom, but for me, I like seeing people be passionate about things, whether it's a case of they love it or hate it. For me, the light is always this: you be passionate, say what you have to say, as long as what you've got to say is justifiable and you're not attacking someone's person, then have at it. I am quite happy to sit here and debate with Nico about how better than people give it credit for Child's Play remake is, and but and I'm more than happy to sit here and debate with you guys. You guys were not high on today's movie. I was, but it's personal taste at the end of the day, and I feel like you guys made some really great points for why you don't like this movie. I feel like I've made some really good points about why I do like this movie. It's yes, Nico, we know you love the Lost Boys.
Well, I wasn't doing anything.
Yeah, you were pointing to your
Just so you know, Nico, that's one of my wife's favorite movies of all time too. So
The greatest vampire movie of all time.
Wait, because earlier you just said it was the greatest movie of all time. Now you've downgraded
Greatest
it.
horror movie of all time.
Okay.
Greatest movie of all time is probably Godfather 2, but that's just.
I mean, I'll just to let you know, Nico, I've went and picked my movies for the rest of the year, and I have kind of done a few of the choices with knocking The Lost Boys out of our top 10 in mind.
Wank.
I mean, it's only going to take one because it's currently sitting in 10th place. It's pretty high up there, but it's only going to take one movie, and I have definitely picked a couple of movies that are going to finish above it. So,
I mean, I got a few that'll probably knock it out, but all you gotta do is you gotta do one of the big ones, and then that's it.
I definitely have some of the big ones planned. But for those as well, up next on the show, not a movie I think is going to bother our top 10. But next on the show, we are talking all about Knock at the Cabin, which I think is going to be a nice, interesting one for us to talk about, Nico. Once again, going to a newer release, something that we're trying to focus a little bit more on. That's your choice next week.
Yes,
why have you decided to go for Knock at the Cabin?
Because we both like wrestling, so we're going to get on that subject at the same time.
Just so we can talk a little bit about Batista. But don't forget, over the course of the next couple of months, we've got a good mix of movies coming up over the next couple of months. We've got your big hitters. Jaws and The Thing are two of their big hitters that are going to come up over the next couple of months that I'm personally convinced is going to knock The Lost Boys out.
Wren, you should come on when I'm on holiday, by the way, because I like your style in this, by the way.
Wren, you're officially the stand-in now for Nico.
No. Fucking replace me. I'm fine with that. But
I've been trying to replace you for months.
I know. We are friends, people. Honestly, we do actually occasionally go for a drink.
But we're also covering some other fun stuff. We've got Megan and Becky coming up for movies that are maybe slightly newer releases. But other things coming up like Don't Breathe, Long Time Dead, which is one I'm quite looking for. Ginger Snaps, The Descent. All these things are coming up, and then. As I said, I've went and picked movies for the rest of the year, and I've sort of themed it a little bit. So I've got our first pre-1950s movie picked. I've got some PG-friendly horror movies in there. I've got some other new releases. I've got some sequels. So I think I've got a good mix, Nico. So you need to go away and pick about 10 to 15 movies.
I can do that.
I'm sure you can.
I could do that now.
I'm sure you can. Anyways, like I say, if you are currently watching us on the
my DVD collection is there. I could.
Yes. If you are currently watching us live, stick around. I'm going to be back in just about 5 to 10 minutes. If you're listening to this on the download, thank you very much for joining us. If you two can stay on the line just for a couple of minutes once I'm finished with the stream, and we can have a very, very quick debrief, and then I will let you guys get on with your Sundays. But thank you once again to Wren for joining us. If you want to do your plugs very quickly one more time before we get out of here.
On all the socials, I'm Wren XXX. I'm monthly contributor to the Horror Flicks and Guitar Picks podcast, which is horror_guitar on Twitter, Horror Flicks and Guitar Picks pod on Instagram, and Horror Flicks and Guitar Picks podcast on Facebook. Tim Mills is the guy that runs the whole show. I'm just one of the monthly contributors to it. So I push that.
Awesome. The links for all of that will be in the description for this episode. So please do go check out. Go follow Wren on the social medias. Has some wonderful opinions out there. As I said, obviously regular contributor to this show as well. And go check out Horror Flicks and Guitar Picks podcast. Nico, where can people find this show?
On the internet.
On the internet, okay. Don't forget, if you'd like to follow us on our social media, you can do so on Twitter at Damned Podcast. We're on Facebook and Instagram at Pod of the Damned. You can email us at podofthedamned@gmail.com. You can watch us live here on Twitch, twitch.tv/Pod of the Damned. And you can subscribe to our Patreon, patreon.com/Pod of the Damned. Thank you once again to everyone.
And we're on Spotify as well, because that's where most people listen to it, that I know.
Most people listen to us on Apple Podcasts, but that's absolutely fine.
No, I mean in folk that I know.
For folk that you know, okay. Yes, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Music, Amazon, and pretty much wherever podcasts can be found. But yes, once again, a big thank you to everyone for coming on the show and for everyone for downloading and listening to this episode. And until next week on the Pod of the Damned, just remember, Nico, you're damned if you do, and you're damned if you don't.
If you don't.